H-10, 9, 15, 8, 14, 7, 13, 10. Départ séquence mise à feu. 1, mise à feu.
You're watching live coverage of the NASA SpaceX Crew5 mission as they return to Earth. Dragon Endurance departed the International Space Station at 11:20 p.m. Pacific last night with NASA astronauts Nicole Mann and Josh Cassada, JAXA astronaut Koichi Wakata, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Anna Kikina. Currently, they're on their way to the targeted splashdown site off the coast of Tampa, Florida. My name is Kate Tice, and I'm the Quality Systems Engineering Manager here at SpaceX. And joining me today from NASA Communications is Leah Cheshire.
Thanks, Kate. It's always great to be here, and of course, another exciting day bringing a crew back from the International Space Station. So upon departing the station, Dragon underwent a sequence of departure burns. Since then, the crew had a rest period and has since kicked off preparations for re-entry. Things are sounding pretty good so far. So in this next phase of the mission is when things really
Allez, salut à tous, et on est ensemble du coup pour l'atterrissage de Crew5. Je vois que vous êtes assez nombreux. Salut Séverine. Je regarde les nouvelles de Boca Chica. Il y a Tomo également, et il y avait également Looping qui est revenu depuis un petit moment. Je vous garantis pas que je vais être en face cam pendant tout le direct, mais en tout cas on va essayer de faire le maximum. Allez, on va essayer de suivre ça impatiemment. On espère que ça se passera bien vu les tempêtes qui se passent en ce moment. Bon, si vous entendez du bruit derrière moi, vous inquiétez pas, c'est normal, il n'y a rien d'extraordinaire à ça. Allez, on va suivre ça avec impatience. Si vous avez la moindre question, c'est pareil, n'hésitez pas. On va essayer d'y répondre au maximum. Et puis on va revenir également sur la fiche technique, hein, voilà, la fiche technique de l'équipage. Alors, le commandant de la mission, Nicole Mann, États-Unis. On a également le pilote, Josh Cassada, également américain. Et là, ça change un petit peu. On est avec le spécialiste de mission 1, Koichi Wakata, que vous connaissez certainement, j'espère en tout cas, du Japon. Voilà, notre petit. Et le spécialiste de mission 2, Anna Kikina, donc notre chère petite russe. Allez. Salut Tomo, il est quelle heure chez toi Tomo? Je sais jamais. Donc voilà, comme je vous disais depuis tout à l'heure, tout simplement, qu'est-ce qu'on fera? Et bien là, on va attendre patiemment le retour du coup de Crew5. Je vous garantis pas voilà, que je vais être en face cam tout le long. Là, je vais sûrement couper pendant un petit moment pour vous faire profiter au maximum de l'immersion, peut-être des commentaires, etc. Parce que bon, en attendant, on va dire, l'amérissage, il n'y aura pas tellement de choses à dire. En tout cas, merci à tous d'être présents ce soir, pour ceux qui se sont réveillés ou qui font de l'insomnie. Ah, clash séparation, ok, ça c'est bien ça. Ils se sont séparés du module de service, ok. Et bien écoutez, on va bientôt, en tout cas bientôt, la prochaine étape sera la rentrée dans l'atmosphère.
Which is the mechanism that holds that trunk, that unpressurized section of the Dragon.
Donc voilà, si vous avez la moindre question, n'hésitez pas.
To the pressurized section. So we're about a minute away from that claw separation, and then trunk separation will occur in about a minute and a half. So yeah, that trunk, like we said before, is the unpressurized section. That's where we can store cargo that is able to be exposed to the vacuum of space. And of course, the astronauts are in the pressurized section. But that heat shield is located at the bottom of the pressurized section. So it's currently being covered up by that trunk. So we'll separate the trunk to expose that heat shield.
Another important thing to note is when we do claw separation, we're separating those umbilicals that connect the trunk to the pressurized section or the actual Dragon capsule where the astronauts are. So,
alors Tomo nous signale qu'il est 12 heures chez lui, nous, beau temps, le Nina se calme. Bah écoute, chez nous Tomo il est 2h du matin. Et au niveau de l'heure internationale, si vous vous posez la question, il est 1h du matin. Vous savez que, en tout cas pour la France métropolitaine, il suffit de retirer 1 heure.
Right now, the Dragon spacecraft is doing a couple of things autonomously, meaning it's doing it on its own. It's isolating the thermal control system fluid loops from the radiator. This system is what will help keep the internal temperature of Dragon very comfortable for Nicole, Josh, Koichi, and Anna during that re-entry phase. Dragon is also initiating separation of the claw mechanism. Like I said, that's coming up.
Merci Tomo pour la précision. Allez, on va y aller calmement ce soir en tout cas.
Nominal trunk jettison.
All right, there's that call. Great news.
Right on time.
Dragon's copy.
So as you can hear, that, like we mentioned, is the core calling out to the crew. They report that they copy.
Alors, je suis là. Je coupe juste la face cam et si vous avez la moindre question, je reviens. À tout de suite.
Connected again, Dragon is exclusively on battery power, and we just additionally got that confirmation of successful trunk jettison as well, coming right on time at about 5:06 p.m. Pacific. So with that trunk separation, telemetry is looking good. The nitrox system is primed for cabin and suit cooling, and the heat shield is now exposed. The trunk is no longer needed. That is setting us up for our deorbit burn here coming up. It's scheduled to start at 5:11 p.m. Pacific time. Again, we anticipate that will last about 11 minutes.
Yeah, that burn is an important one. That is what commits the crew to that location. Like we said, we're setting up for a landing off the coast of Tampa, Florida. And it's that deorbit burn that is the final burn that Dragon performs to really re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. Now, up next, we have the final steps that Dragon will perform prior to re-entry, the slew or maneuver to deorbit burn attitude and the deorbit burn itself. Leah, you did indicate that that attitude was correct and that we're going to start that deorbit burn soon. That will be the last time that the forward Dracos, which are the four thrusters located on top of the vehicle near the nose cone, it's the last time that those will ignite. The deorbit burn will place Dragon on a precise trajectory to return to the splashdown zone off the coast of Florida. And like Leah said, it'll last about 11 minutes once it begins.
And again, we're tracking that to come around 5:11 p.m. Pacific, so 8:11 p.m. Eastern time. And we are actually under an hour now until our anticipated splashdown time. So when we say things are happening fast, they are happening pretty fast. But again, this is an autonomous flight like we've seen with Dragon in the past. And our 4 crew members are riding comfortably, it appears. Their visors are still up. Once we get closer to that deorbit burn, we anticipate to hear a call from the core to the crew to go ahead and lower their visors just as a precautionary measure ahead of that major burn.
That's right. And the crew has already completed the required suit leak checks. It's basically when they pull all the zippers up, close the visor into the locked position, and the Dragon spacecraft pressurizes, or basically flows a little bit of that air into the suits and holds it at a certain pressure for a certain amount of time, usually a couple minutes, just to make sure that those suits are, basically all the zippers are in place and that seal with the visor is functional, and really just making sure that the spacesuit provides its own individual environment for the crew member during the more dynamic events of today's procedures. So like Leah just said, we can see that those visors are still up, but we know that they've already completed the suit leak checks, had 4 good leak checks there. This is also a great shot because you can see the tablet on Commander Nicole Mann's leg. So those are the tablets that are used for monitoring Dragon's progress and the different statuses and states the vehicle is in. It's also what they use to log the consumables during flight. So we talked before about that period of time where the crew is off duty. They can do whatever they want to do. And as you can imagine, staying hydrated is important, and they use those tablets to track how much water they drank and out of which water bottle it was. So it's just helping to make sure that everything is accounted for. Like we said, we're coming up to the deorbit burn. We're about 5 seconds away from that burn start.
Now again, this is going to be an 11-minute burn, approximately. Just over 11 minutes. It's pretty large. We've got to slow the astronauts down from orbital velocity at 17,500 miles per hour and put them on that track to Tampa, Florida, in that splashdown. If you look, you can see the windows near Josh Cassidy's feet. Actually, it's in the background, but it's bright. It's clearly they're in an orbital daylight. But when you're traveling at orbital velocity, 17,500 miles per hour, you see a sunrise and a sunset every 45 minutes. And if you look on their crew displays, it looks like you can see some of the thrusters are firing. So sounds like the deorbit burn is underway. Again, started right on time at 5:11 p.m. Pacific, targeting about 11 minutes for that burn.
We're looking at about 10 minutes and 20 seconds remaining in that deorbit burn.
Within just the last 10 minutes, Dragon jettisoned its trunk. It initiated that deorbit burn about 2 minutes ago now. So for these operations, NASA and SpaceX closely coordinate with the United States Coast Guard and have established a safety zone to ensure public safety, safety of those involved, and in the recovery operations, as well as, of course, our crew on board the returning spacecraft. So multiple notices are issued to the mariners in advance and during recovery operations. And Coast Guard patrol boats are deployed to discourage boaters from entering the splashdown zones. So we want to take a moment to stress to the public the need to respect this safety zone. Recovering a spacecraft from the water is a hazardous operation, and so any other boats interfering in this process can increase risk to the astronauts in the capsule, those teams working to recover them from the water, and of course even the safety of any public boaters. So for the safety of the crew and yours, we recommend tuning in here. Just sit back and watch. We're going to give you the best views of our astronauts on their way home.
Like I mentioned earlier, this deorbit burn is the last time those 4 forward Draco thrusters will fire. Dragon Endurance has not yet entered the Earth's atmosphere. This deorbit burn is what will line the vehicle up and put it on its final trajectory to the landing site off the coast of Tampa, Florida. As you can see on your screen there right now, Nicole, Josh, Koichi, and Anna are using their screens to keep tabs on that burn duration, the Draco thruster firings, which you can see lighting up on those displays in front of them, the trajectory details like the entry angle, capsule perigee, and how much distance remaining until deorbit burn termination. So in that center screen, you can actually see their trajectory, their planned trajectory there. Dragon is flying itself, so all that the crew has to do is stay strapped in their seats and keep tabs on things, which I know for me personally, I love looking out windows when I'm traveling, especially in airplanes, and so I imagine if I were flying, this part would be really hard for me because I just want to get out of my seat and look out the window.
Those last few space views, I'm with you. I'm always a window seat girl.
Now, with Nicole, Josh, Koichi, and Anna ready to deorbit and splash down back on planet Earth, they'll be heading to one of 7 targeted sites supported by SpaceX and NASA. All of these sites are located off the coast of Florida, either in the Gulf of Mexico or the Atlantic Ocean. Spreading the supported sites across multiple locations actually helps to maximize the return opportunities for this mission and future crews, lowering the chance that we'll have to wave off due to bad weather. So pretty helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So yesterday, NASA and SpaceX together selected primary and alternate splashdown locations. Obviously, our primary, as we've discussed, is off the coast of Tampa, Florida, and the alternate is Daytona. This selection process works with a lot of different variables, including the space station's orbital trajectory, the landing sites available, and favorable weather, as you mentioned. Of course, how much free flight capability Dragon has for the trip home, and the sleep schedule for those returning crew members.
We'll start with calculating daily return options based off of the space station's current orbit and Dragon's capabilities to maneuver and line up for re-entry. The time from undock to landing at the primary site can vary from less than 6 hours to more than 39. Getting home the quickest comes with some obvious benefits, but we always have to make sure that the crew is properly rested for dynamic operations, preventing us from scheduling 20-plus hour days for them. Trajectory and ballistics experts provide the daily opportunities that would line up Dragon with the 7 landing zones and split them into what we call ascending and descending opportunities.
Dragon uses its Draco thrusters after leaving station to execute a series of altitude-lowering maneuvers until line up with this selected primary site. But it can also change to different alternate sites while in free flight if sudden weather moves in that we need to avoid. That's something we're currently or constantly looking at as weather, so we make the final call to proceed about 2.5 hours before the crew undocks. For the Crew5 return, as always, we look at a number of weather items. Some of those more obvious ones are no rain or chance of lightning in the recovery zone, both for the safety of the crew in the capsule and the recovery teams on the water. We're also looking for wind speeds less than 15 feet per second, or about 10 miles per hour, and relatively calm seas so we can safely execute recovery operations, which includes landing a helicopter on the recovery ship to fly Nicole, Josh, Koichi, and Anna back to Florida. Now, I have heard the weather described in 4 different ways for this Tampa site. I've heard go, very go, home run, and stupendous. So it sounds like they have a pretty nice landing site waiting for them today.
I think one time we also got super go.
Oh, wow. That's another level. So once Dragon began flying free yesterday, there were a number of additional checkpoints to either proceed toward the primary site, head to the alternate, or select a new zone based on real-time weather data. These checks happened all the way up until we are in the final hours before the deorbit burn, which started about 6 minutes ago. That's this last burn in the trip home, and it commits the Dragon capsule to re-entering the Earth's atmosphere.
Before we go any further, let's go ahead and take a minute to meet our crew.
First up is Nicole Mann on the left side of the screen there. She's the California native who holds a Master of Science in Mechanical Engineering and is a colonel in the Marine Corps. She was an FA-18 Hornet and Super Hornet test pilot and deployed twice aboard aircraft carriers in support of combat operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. Nicole was selected by NASA in June 2013 and in the years that followed led the astronaut corps in the development of hardware in the Artemis program. She is the Dragon commander for Crew5, which was her first space flight. She's right there in the foreground of the shot monitoring this deorbit burn, and she is also the first Native American woman to stay on the International Space Station.
Sitting next to Nicole is Josh Cassada, who grew up in Bear Lake, Minnesota. The physicist and U.S. Navy test pilot flew 23 combat missions and later became an instructor at the U.S. Naval Test Pilot School, which is a common path military officers to take to join NASA. Cassada is one of more than 100 graduates who became astronauts going back to the Mercury program. On Earth, he served as capsule commander in mission control, but for his first space flight on Crew5, he has served as pilot on Dragon.
In the role of mission specialist, you can't see him here. He's to the left of Nicole. That's Japanese astronaut Koichi Wakata. Koichi has a doctorate in aerospace engineering and in 1996 became the first Japanese mission specialist aboard the Space Shuttle Endeavour for STS-72. In addition to his current mission, Koichi flew 4 Space Shuttle missions, a Roscosmos Soyuz, and was on a long-duration stay aboard the International Space Station. And just on March 6th, just a few days ago, Koichi reached his 500th day in space.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. The second mission specialist is Roscosmos cosmonaut Anna Kikina. She graduated from the this is a tough one, Novosibirsk State Academy of Water Transport in 2006. In 2012, Anna officially became a candidate for the position of test cosmonaut. Crew5 was Anna's first flight into space as part of the resumption of integrated crews on U.S. Crew spacecraft and the Soyuz with the Russian State Space Corporation, Roscosmos.
Now we are still in that deorbit burn. Those crew members now about 42 minutes away from that targeted splashdown time of 9:02 p.m. Eastern Time. It looks like we have about 2 minutes left, maybe a minute and a half in that deorbit burn, but things are going well so far. All of those 4 Draco engines firing for the last time before closing that nose cone and preparing the capsule for re-entry.
There on your screens, you can see the crew is continuing to monitor Dragon's progress in this deorbit burn. We have about a minute and a half, 1 minute and 31 seconds to be exact, remaining in this burn. As you can see with those displays, there's a small set of physical buttons that the crew can use for emergency situations. And then the displays are touchscreen, which has more features that they can use in flight, in addition to the tablets that are on their legs. You can see Nicole's there on her left leg. We can also see a good shot of the control panel for the seats themselves. That's where the mic volume and the push-to-talk button is also located for the crew to use. And I believe that's also where the crew cabin light button is located. So just like an airplane, everybody has their own personal window, or excuse me, personal light that they can use.
Reading light.
To read, exactly. There's also USB ports in the Dragon capsule as well.
That's convenient.
Yeah, not on the chairs. It's kind of like above their head, so they can't really reach them while in flight, but certainly useful during the opportunities where they don't have to be in their seats and can charge up those tablets that they use.
Now, continuing to monitor, again, we are in the deorbit burn and should be wrapping up here very shortly. Crew members just monitoring as this is a completely autonomous flight.
10 seconds remaining in this deorbit burn. That deorbit burn is...
Deorbit burn complete. Performance nominal. Nose cone closure initiated.
Dragon copy.
Just what we wanted to hear. Deorbit burn is complete. Nominal is always the word we're looking for. And so with that complete, next up is closure of the nose cone, since we won't be using those Draco thrusters anymore.
That's right. That nose cone is what protects those Draco thrusters, as well as that forward hatch, which is the hatch that the crew, of course, used to dock to the space station and get in and out of Dragon while it was docked on station. That side hatch is what they will be using, or the side hatch, which is on the side of Dragon, is what they will be using to get out of the capsule after splashdown, but not that forward hatch, which is what is being covered up now or what will be covered up as we step into nose cone closure.
Wow.
And there we can see a live view of that nose cone closing on Dragon Endurance.
So in the Dragon is currently inhibiting those forward bulkhead Draco thrusters that we just used to complete the deorbit burn. Those are inhibited now, I should say, meaning that it was safe to latch the nose cone shut. And the vehicle has initiated the nitrox suit purge. This will help keep Nicole, Josh, Koichi, and Anna cool and comfortable during re-entry, which is coming up in about 20 minutes. At this point, like we saw, the nose cone is closing, protecting the forward hatch for re-entry. So Nicole, Josh, Koichi, and Anna are using their screens to continue monitoring the locking of the nose cone, which is done by a set of hooks.
That's exactly right. Now we have a live view there of Mission Control Hawthorne, actually located just to the side of Leah and I. That is where the calls are coming from that we hear to the crew, coming from SpaceX Core Mike Blasco. Another view there of that nose cone closing. There's about another minute and 14 seconds remaining in the nose cone close. But yeah, those calls that we hear to the crew and basically communicating status of what's happening or what has completed, that comes from that room that you see there on your screen.
We're standing by for the confirmation of nose cone closure. We are now about 18 hours since undock yesterday. So we've mentioned that the crew has had time to rest, relax, maybe eat a little bit, take a nap. But right now are monitoring the continuation of nose cone closure, just waiting on that call out to the crew.
About 30 seconds remaining now to nose cone close. As we said before, since we won't be using the 4 forward Draco thrusters, and obviously the hatch is sealed and shut, we are able to close that nose cone. It's an important step because ultimately this is the, now that the trunk has been separated, this is the last major physical change that Dragon will undergo prior to deorbit burn.
Dragon that the Crew5 crew members are flying on today is named Endurance. It was dubbed that by the Crew3 crew in honor of the endurance shown by the NASA and SpaceX teams as they were building and training, or building the spacecraft and training the crew through the pandemic. So I thought that was a really nice way to honor both the teams.
Very fitting for sure. So we're standing by for the call out to confirm that the nose cone has been closed. Again, this is the last major physical change that Dragon undergoes prior to that deorbit burn, or excuse me, prior to re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. They've already completed the deorbit burn itself.
Yes.
So this nose cone closure is an important, one of the last steps prior to that re-entry.
That deorbit burn really commits us
Salut
to
Hervé,
returning to
ce
Earth.
soir,
There's
il y a le
not
retour
really
des
any
anciens.
waving off after that
Salut à
happens.
tous, je viens juste
And as we
d'arriver, il y a un
mentioned
retour
before,
sur Terre. Oui,
we
Hervé,
are
il y a le
targeting a
retour de
splashdown off the
Crew5.
coast of Tampa, Florida.
Crew5 qui va amérir
Now
dans
look here
les
at
prochaines
both
heures.
teams
Actuellement,
monitoring
ils
the
sont en
mission. Over on the
phase de
left is
désorbitage.
Mission Control in Hawthorne, and on the right is Mission Control at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston,
Désolé pour le
Texas.
bruit, il y a un peu de
Home
monde
sweet home.
aujourd'hui dans le
They
studio.
were in joint operations while Dragon was docked to the International Space Station.
Tout au long de ce
until the
direct, vous allez voir,
spacecraft
je
exited
vais
the
être en face cam, je serai pas en face
So
cam.
now the teams are
Vous devez bien vous douter, il y a
continuing
un peu
to
de monde.
watch the
Du coup, Là,
watch
on
the
est toujours avec le
re-entry
son
of
de
the
SpaceX
spacecraft
et la
and
NASA qui est à
prepare to
votre droite.
welcome the astronauts
En ce
home.
moment même,
But in
on
a
s'apprête
monitoring
à
mode
se
now, since
désorbiter
we
pour
are
rentrer
obviously
progressivement dans
quite a ways
l'atmosphère.
away from the International
S'ensuivra
Space Station
donc
itself.
après les phases, vous savez, comme d'habitude, de silence radio
And
que
as for
Hervé
the crew on the
connaît
International
très bien.
Space Station,
Donc
they
c'est
are
un laps de
in a
temps.
sleep period right
Généralement,
now,
ça
but
peut
they
aller de
do have
3
the
à 5 minutes. Chez
opportunity to
SpaceX,
watch
c'est
these
plus 5 minutes
broadcasts and
où les
watch
communications
their
radio
friends
sont
arrive back on
complètement
Earth.
out,
So
voilà, dû à la
hopefully, if
rentrée,
they're
tout
watching, they
simplement,
still take some
pour
time to get a little shut-eye later
et puis
tonight.
après, on espère que l'amérissage se passera bien. On suivra
At this
également la
point in time,
récupération.
the nose cone is
Écoutez,
closed.
on
We're just
peut
waiting
refaire
for that to
également
be
un petit
called out to
bilan
the
sur
crew
l'équipage. Attendez, hop, je
from
reprends
the
vite fait ma
SpaceX
fiche
core.
pour
Next
pas
up will
écorcher
be
les mots.
to initiate
Puisque,
that
vous savez,
nitrox
on a
suit
2
purge.
Américains, un Japonais et
Again, that
une
just helps
Russe.
to keep the
Donc le
crew
commandant,
super
c'est
comfortable
Nicole Main,
during
donc
that re-entry
américain.
period.
Le pilote, pardon, Josh Casada, américain, spécialiste de mission A, Koichi Wakata, que vous
And then
connaissez un
coming
petit
up a
peu quand
little
même,
bit later,
du Japon. Là, j'ai que ça.
tonight around
Spécialiste de
5:50
mission 2, Anna Kikina de la Russie.
p.m.
Voilà.
Pacific time.
Donc
That's
vous inquiétez
when
pas,
the
vous pouvez
entry
marquer vos messages,
of
je
the
les vois, c'est
spacecraft will
juste que
begin. And
je
during that
coupe la
time,
facecam de
we
temps en temps,
anticipate
mais
to
vous
lose
inquiétez pas,
communication with the spacecraft
je
as the
suis présent. J'espère que vous m'avez bien entendu, j'avais oublié de couper le son. En tout cas, je suis très content que vous soyez tous là. On va passer une bonne partie de la soirée jusqu'à l'amérissage et la récupération de la capsule par les bateaux de SpaceX. Et puis voilà, vous connaissez le processus maintenant. Ça va être une longue soirée, pas une longue. On va se coucher tard. Puis encore bienvenue à tous ceux qui nous regardent comme la Nouvelle-Calédonie, de Tomo. Je sais pas si Hervé... Oh si, Hervé et Tomo, vous avez déjà dû vous croiser dans le chat. Allez, en tout cas... Je retire la facecam, mais je suis là, donc n'hésitez pas à poser des questions.
For our 4 crew members on Crew5, for 3 of them, this was their first space flight. So Nicole Mann, Josh Casada, and Anna Kikina are all coming home with 157 days in space. As we mentioned earlier, Koichi Wakata this is his 5th space flight. So he is coming home with a total of 505 days in space.
And in following along with the procedures that the crew are stepping through.
Nose cone secured for entry.
Dragon copy.
And there is that confirmation of nose cone closure that we were standing by for. Now, as we begin the second half of entry, Dragon is now beginning to inject that cooled nitrox or nitrogen-oxygen mixture into the air being delivered to the suits worn by Nicole, Josh, Koichi, and Anna. Again, that's what will allow the crew to remain super comfortable while the external temperatures reach 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit, so a little warm on the outside. That heat shield is pointing forward, leading the capsule to the landing site. And speaking of the heat shield, Dragon's primary heat shield is comprised of PICA 3.0, which stands for Phenolic Impregnated Carbon Ablator. The first generation PICA was actually first developed by NASA for studying and sampling comets within our solar system.
Yeah, so SpaceX partnered with NASA to develop PICA X, which was the 2nd generation product used on all Dragon 1 commercial resupply missions that successfully resupplied the station on on 20 missions. PICA 3.0 was developed specifically for use on Dragon 2 crew and cargo spacecraft with enhanced structural and thermal properties that optimized the heat shield and drove down the cost and mass.
The remainder of Dragon capsule is composed primarily of a SpaceX proprietary ablative material. It's another class of thermal protection, which is lighter weight versus PICA and protects the underlying composite structure during that reentry to ensure that the structural capabilities are maintained.
Encore
So while Dragon
combien
will
de
experience
tours de terre
temperatures
avant
well over
Amerrissage? Eh bien
3,000
écoute,
degrees
là
Fahrenheit
exactement,
during
ils
peak
viennent
re-entry
d'amorcer,
conditions, the
ils vont
characteristics
bientôt
of the thermal
amorcer le
protection
retour sur Terre,
systems,
donc
also
progressivement,
referred to as
donc j'ai envie de te dire,
TPS,
dans vraiment très peu de
coupled
temps,
with
toi,
the
t'es vraiment
environmental
très près de la
cooling and
caméra pour le
life
coup.
support system, which we refer to as ECLIS, that's in the
On va
pressurized
relire
interior
vite
that will
fait la
ensure
fiche
that Nicole,
technique. Je vais
Josh,
tout
Koichi, and
sur
Anna
la
stay
NASA.
cool
Je
and
t'avoue que j'ai pris
comfortable
un peu en
during
cours de
all
route. On a
phases
pris
of
beaucoup
re-entry
de
through
temps tout à
splash
l'heure
channel.
en ce qui concerne
After
le
Crew
vol
Dragon
avorté
Endurance
de
has
Terra One.
re-entered
Alors,
the Earth's
d'ailleurs, en parlant de
atmosphere,
ça,
a
j'ai
series of parachutes will
toujours pas de
deploy to slow the
précision.
crew's descent.
J'ai
The first will
regardé
be
tout à
a
to
l'heure,
as
two-stroke
mais la
ECLIS,
nouvelle
parachute,
date,
followed
pour
by the
l'instant,
4
on
main
n'a
chutes
pas de nouvelle
to
date.
guide Dragon to its first contact with
La
Earth
capsule
since
Crew5
launching in
devrait
April
amérir du coup
last year.
en Floride à
Dragon will
9h
automatically
PM,
deploy
donc 9h
these
PM, ça nous fait
parachutes
du
when
3h,
different pressure
3h02 du matin,
and
heure
positioning
française.
sensors on the capsule
Donc,
detect that they are at
normalement
the right speed
Amerrissage
and
dans
altitude.
30 minutes.
The
Voilà.
vehicle
Donc
velocity
si on
at
compte
the
approximativement
drogue deploy
les 3
parachute
à 5
timing is
minutes de
about
blackout où
350
les
miles per hour, so they
communications
deployed
radio
about
sont coupées,
18,000 feet.
ce qui nous
Now, the
laisserait et
vehicle
le temps de
velocity
descente
when
en
the main
parachute
parachutes deploy is at approximately
de 15
119
minutes.
miles per hour. They'll deploy at about
On devrait
6,500 feet.
dans très peu
And
de temps
when we
commencer
have our water
la
splashdown, the
descente
spacecraft is
en direction de la
traveling
Terre.
cool and comfortable, approximately 16 miles per hour. So
Donc
the
voilà,
highest
Amerrissage,
G load we
normalement on
expect the
devrait atteindre
crew
les
to
côtes de la
experience during
Californie
re-entry is about 3 to
du
5
coup à
Gs.
3h02 du matin heure française. Je parle pour Tomo
So
en
again, with nose
Nouvelle-Calédonie.
cone closure,
Donc Tomo
we
pour
don't
toi ça
have a
fera
whole lot of
attends que je me
visual
trompe pas,
changes, like you
ça fera
mentioned, that we will see.
du 13h02
And our
de
crew members
l'après-midi.
are already in their
1h02 de
suits and in their
l'après-midi.
seats, as we
Voilà,
had a
on est
preview
on
of
est en
earlier.
blackout communication, c'est ce
So
que je
coming
t'avais
up
dit Hervé.
next
Donc à
will
partir
be
de
our
ce moment-là,
anticipated
silence
loss of
radio, c'est
signal
on va
around
dire le moment où la
5:48 p.m.
capsule
Pacific time.
rentre dans
The crew just
l'atmosphère,
got an
donc
update
c'est là
on
où
that from
la
Core here
fusion
in
commence.
Hawthorne.
Donc
Before
on
we
est,
started
je
the
crois, en
broadcast.
parlant
So
de SpaceX,
again,
parce
when
que
we're
les
in that
capsules
entry
Apollo,
period
c'était
and
du 3
plasma is
minutes chez
building up
SpaceX, on est
around
sur
the
du 5
spacecraft,
minutes de
it makes it hard
coupure
for us to
communication radio.
communicate back and forth.
Suite
So
à ça,
during that
on
time, we
aura
won't have
donc la
communication
rentrée
with the
progressive
astronauts
vraiment
or
dans
the
la
spacecraft
stratosphère,
itself.
etc.
However,
Et donc
again,
c'est
Dragon is fully
approximativement, c'est
autonomous
là
and
où ça va
continues
durer plus
guiding
longtemps,
those
tout simplement.
crew
Vous
members
connaissez le
to
bail
our
avec
splashdown site in
l'ouverture des
Tampa.
parachutes.
That's right, that
On en a
expected
pour
loss of signal or
un
LOS,
petit
as
quart
you'll
d'heure
hear
de
it called
descente.
out,
Après
is coming
l'horaire
up
que je vous ai
in
dit,
14
c'est vraiment
minutes on the dot,
approximatif. Je vous ai
actually.
dit 3h02 du
And
matin.
it's
Ça peut être 3
something that
heures. Bon,
happens
généralement,
every
SpaceX,
time
c'est assez
one of
précis,
the
hein, ils
Crew
tiennent vraiment
Dragon
à
capsules
ça.
returns to
Mais
Earth. It
voilà,
lasts
on est
only
en
a few minutes,
communication, on est en
but it's
blackout,
something that
Hervé, du coup, pour répondre à ta
we
question.
will hopefully at that time be able to have some views of Dragon as it is.
Désolé. Eh ben, je vais recommencer du coup. Du coup, je redis où est-ce que j'en étais. Donc là, on est en blackout. Donc le blackout chez SpaceX, donc c'est le moment où la capsule rentre dans l'atmosphère entre guillemets de la Terre. Chez SpaceX, on est sur 5 minutes. En ce qui concerne, pour donner un temps de référence sur les capsules Apollo, on était sur 3, donc c'est le moment où la capsule pénètre l'atmosphère, là où le bouclier thermique du coup prend tout, donc c'est normal, hein, voilà, qu'on n'ait pas de communication. Le temps le plus long se passera donc après donc la reprise des communications. Donc Hervé, je pense que tu connais. Hein. Du coup, on va avoir quand même un bon petit quart d'heure avec l'ouverture des parachutes. Et on devrait, comme je le disais, avoir un amérissage. Alors, selon les heures et les calculs de SpaceX, on devrait avoir un amérissage sur les côtes de la Californie vers 3h02 du matin, heure française. Et donc, j'avais dit pour Tomo, toi, ça fera à peu près 1h02 de l'après-midi. On est plus sur 1h que sur 1h02. Hein. On n'est pas à la minute près. En tout cas, à l'heure actuelle, on est en blackout. Donc là, coupure communication, on a amorcé la descente. Voilà, voilà. Et oui, désolé, j'avais oublié de couper la NASA. Attends, je vais vous le marquer pour ceux qui n'auraient pas entendu ce que j'ai dit. Voilà, pour ceux qui n'auraient pas entendu, je vous ai remarqué un petit texte. Donc, amérissage prévu, ça peut varier. 3h02, heure française. Et puis maintenant, bah écoutez, on va patienter. Voilà, tout simplement. Tiens, pendant que vous êtes là, je vais regarder si on a une nouvelle date de prévue. Alors, toujours pas de date en ce qui concerne la fusée Terra One. Donc la première fusée en conception 3D. Allez, on va patienter. Donc normalement, si le blackout devrait pas tarder à se terminer. « 1000 points de lumière, mer des ténèbres. » J'adore Muki. Tu peux continuer à marquer des phrases. Je bois mon café. Très bien, Tomo. Moi aussi, je pense que je vais aller m'en faire un. Ça pique chez nous. Ouais, il est 2h40 du matin. Donc, ouais, Amerrissage approximativement prévu dans 20 minutes. Donc, 20 minutes, on touche les côtes de la Californie. Hein. On aura un visuel de la capsule bien avant. Hein. On va avoir tout le déploiement des... Ah, je sais pas si SpaceX nous filmera avant le déploiement des parachutes. Je suis pas sûr. Enfin, on va voir. Bon, je vais vous laisser le temps du blackout. Et puis, bah écoutez, on revient du coup juste après.
They don't get to choose a favorite and only get on the treadmill every day. They have to make sure that they're also maintaining their muscle mass and their bone density with a little bit of weightlifting as well.
One thing that I never took into consideration, of course, when those parachutes deploy, because they are slowing the capsule down, there is a small jolt that occurs during that deployment. And so, and also whenever they splash down, you'll also hear brace for splashdown or brace for impact. That is just the crew being aware and like just getting ready, holding on to their seats for those moments where there's a little bit more of a noticeable feel to where they are in their seats.
Right, and I think it's very interesting after watching so many splashdowns, whenever we have main parachute deploy, they don't open to their full ballooned shape right away. They do something called reefing. So they open up quite slowly, or sometimes it appears that way. That way, that jolt is not, it's not exaggerated any more than it has to be. So they open up slowly and slow the spacecraft down again to about 16 miles per hour.
Again, we're in the anticipated loss of signal. There's 2 minutes or about somewhere between 2 and 3.5 minutes remaining. Sometimes it's hard to tell exactly when we'll be able to get that signal back, but in about 3 minutes, we will start hearing the core reach out to the crew to see if they can make that connection. Once again, the loss of signal is expected, totally normal due to that buildup of plasma around the exterior of the capsule.
And we also have our recovery teams already on site, already on Shannon, the SpaceX recovery ship, and that is waiting off the coast of Tampa. Some of those team members arrived by helicopter. We have one of our NASA public affairs officers also on.
And there's our first view of the Crew5 crew in Dragon Endurance re-entering the Earth's atmosphere.
Allez, on commence à voir des images du coup. On commence à voir des images. Ça, c'est bien. Moi, je vous rappelle voilà, qu'il fait nuit aux États-Unis. On est dans les alentours de... On va bientôt atteindre 9h du matin. 9h du soir, pardon. Donc, voilà. Bon, bah, ça ne sera pas des images en haute définition, mais on commence à avoir un aperçu de la rentrée atmosphérique de la Crew Dragon. Je crois que c'est une des premières fois qu'on a une traînée comme ça. D'ailleurs, il y a Inspiration Créative qui va passer vous dire un petit coucou, je pense. Tu vois, tu peux venir là un petit peu. Tiens, viens dire bonjour vite fait. T'es pas obligé de mettre la chaise. Oh, comme tu veux. Oui, t'inquiète pas, t'es décoiffé de toute façon. Tiens, regarde, tu peux dire bonjour déjà.
Salut tout le monde.
Ah, tu viens juste dire un petit coucou. Regarde, on commence à voir on avait les premières images
j'ai vu.
de la Crew Dragon. C'est une des premières fois qu'on a une image de nuit. Ça sent bon pour la. Bon, tu vas pas rester avec nous tout le direct, mais bon, tu commences à revenir progressivement. Mais il y a plus important à s'occuper pour l'instant. Mais t'as vu, on a eu des anciens. Il y a Hervé F1 qui. Tiens, retour aux images. On a Hervé qui nous a rejoint, Tomo de Nouvelle-Calédonie, Looping. Alors je sais pas si tu te souviens de Looping Aéro, il était très présent pendant quelques mois, il est revenu aujourd'hui d'ailleurs. Qui c'est d'autres qu'on a Manu, tu connais Manu,
oui, Manu. Ouais.
Séverine.
Tu te
rappelles de Séverine?
Oui, je me souviens de tout le monde.
Bah voilà, il y a eu un peu de personnes qui sont passées tout à l'heure. Vous êtes déjà plus de 75 depuis le direct. C'est bien, 3h du matin.
Oui. Vous êtes courageux, c'est bien.
Tout comme moi, tu vois, la perfection.
Voilà.
Bien sûr. Allez, regarde, on est de retour avec des images. Bon, ça, c'est des images résiduelles qu'on a là.
Oui.
Voilà, il est 21h en Californie ou en Floride. Oh,
En Floride.
Pardon, en Floride. Il est 21h en Floride. On devrait avoir un amérissage d'ici un petit quart d'heure maintenant, une petite dizaine de minutes. Bon, on peut cibler la Crew Dragon, le point lumineux central. Je doute qu'on ait un bel aperçu des parachutes, à part si on a une belle caméra thermique. Ah bah voilà, on a une belle caméra thermique.
Tu réclamais une caméra thermique, elle est là.
Et du coup, on devrait bien voir les parachutes. Salut Tiffany, nous dit Looping.
Eh ben salut Looping.
Salut
Manu.
Tiff. Et ben voilà.
Et ben salut tout le monde et puis merci d'être aussi nombreux.
Tu veux prendre ma place?
Non, je vais te laisser travailler, n'est-ce pas?
Allez, on va suivre ça avec impatience. Je suis content quand même. C'est rare. C'est pas souvent qu'on a les amérissages de Crew Dragon. Bon, c'est vrai qu'on préfère de jour. Hein, les images sont plus belles. Mais bon. Bah écoute, tu veux rester encore avec nous ou t'as autre chose à faire?
Et maintenant, je vais me sauver. Je vais vous abandonner. Je reviendrai peut-être tout à l'heure.
Je vais pleurer là.
Non, ne sois pas triste.
Ah bon. Déploiement des parachutes. Bah tu vois, t'es là juste au moment des parachutes. Normalement, on devrait voir. Alors ça se fait pas en une fois. Il y a déjà un premier parachute.
Un parachute pour freiner déjà
voilà, très bien.
La descente.
Et après, on a, je crois qu'il y en a
les
trois. Voilà, les 3 autres parachutes hypersoniques qui s'ouvrent.
Qui sont rouges et blancs avec des trous.
Et là, voilà, le parachute vient de s'ouvrir, à mon avis, parce qu'on a vu la caméra baisser. Mais écoute, pour l'instant, ça a l'air de très très bien se passer. Bah merci Tiffany.
Et ben bon courage.
Bah merci.
Allez, salut tout le monde.
Salut. Allez. C'était sympa. On se retrouve tous. Nous aussi, on va pleurer, nous dit Looping. D'ailleurs, on n'a pas de bol. Ouais. J'ai l'impression que c'est la réunion des anciens. Allez, on est toujours avec un visuel de la caméra thermique. Alors, je peux dire des bêtises, mais il me semble que les caméras qu'on a, il y a 2 solutions. Soit ça vient du bateau, ou je supposerais plutôt que ça vient d'un hélicoptère, comme c'est souvent le cas près des zones de récupération. En tout cas, non, là vu qu'on est vu, non, je dis une bêtise. À mon avis, on est vu du bateau, parce qu'on là, on a une vue du dessous et notamment on peut voir les 2 premiers parachutes qui viennent de s'ouvrir. Ah, ça y est. On vient de larguer les parachutes. On avait une caméra vue intérieure. Ça devrait être bon. Et pour l'instant, on est dans les temps. Je crois même qu'on potentiellement... Attends, il reste combien de temps? Il reste moins de 3 minutes. Oh si, en moins de 3 minutes, on va atteindre l'océan. Bon là, c'est un peu compliqué avec les images résiduelles de vraiment se focaliser. Voilà, on va rester sur les images thermiques. Les parachutes sont pas encore ouverts. Enfin, ils sont déployés, mais ils sont pas ouverts encore. On peut apercevoir, voilà, ils sont tous là. Les 4 parachutes. Ça y est. Les 4 parachutes sont en train de s'ouvrir. Bon, on vous rappelle encore que c'est des parachutes hypersoniques. C'est pour ça qu'ils ne sont pas pleins. Il y a toujours un petit trou d'air pour éviter que justement le parachute se déchire à très haute vitesse. Bon, c'est très trompeur là, avec les images résiduelles. Par contre, ce qu'on peut apercevoir, c'est les flux lumineux. Bon, c'est peu commun par contre. Ouais, on peut voir les projecteurs qui tentent d'éclairer en tout cas la Crew Dragon. Les images sont pas hyper... Je parle à l'inspiration qui est juste derrière. Les images sont pas hyper nettes, mais ça change un peu quand même d'avoir un amérissage de nuit comme ça. Et on peut voir les projecteurs à chaque fois qui... Alors, je t'avoue que ça peut être dû à plusieurs choses. Ça peut être le type de caméra, comme... Tu vois, par exemple, là, je pense que c'est une caméra de nuit basique, mais on n'est pas sur une caméra thermique encore. Et encore, celle qui est en noir et blanc, c'est pas une caméra thermique, c'est une caméra nocturne. Je dis caméra thermique, bon, parce que voilà, moi-même, je me comprends, mais en fait, c'est pas vrai ce que je dis. Quand on est en noir et blanc, c'est une caméra nocturne. Après, il y a caméra nuit, caméra nocturne, et la caméra thermique, tu sais, c'est pour la chaleur. Chaleur, froid, chaud, et c'est comme ça qu'on distingue les sources de chaleur, notamment. Donc je me rectifie, on passe de temps en temps sur la caméra nocturne. Et là on n'est plus sur la caméra classique, si tu préfères.
Du coup c'est 4 parachutes.
C'est 4 parachutes. Eh ben écoute, on va bientôt atteindre les 100 personnes qui seront passées ce soir. On a fait un bon petit quota, je trouve. Splashdown, allez, Splashdown dans quelques instants. Pourquoi ça a bugué? Qu'est-ce qui se passe? Non, ça y est, ça a repris. Ouh, j'ai eu peur. Donc, allez, Splashdown dans... donc, on va amerrir d'ici quelques... je vais pas dire quelques... 3h02, c'est l'heure que j'avais annoncée. Bon, voilà. Bon, à quelques minutes près, on était bon. Allez, on est toujours en train de descendre. Allez, Crew5, ça y est, on aperçoit la mer. Et bah écoute, on aura atteint l'heure que je vous avais dit, donc 3h02. Splashdown dans quelques secondes. C'est parti pour le décompte. 3, 2, 1, Splashdown. Ça y est. Crew5 est de retour sur Terre. Crew5, Splashdown, back on the earth. Voilà, Crew5 de retour sur Terre. Donc, retour du commandant Nicholman, du coup américain. Le pilote Josh Cassada, pareil, américain. Welcome back, donc bienvenue à l'équipe Crew5 sur Terre. Le spécialiste de mission 1, Koshi Wakata, donc de la JAXA, notre japonais. Et notre russe, Anna Kikina, du coup, spécialiste de mission 2, qui viennent à l'instant d'atterrir en Floride. Bon là maintenant vous connaissez le processus, hein, ça va être assez long entre les équipes de sauvetage, les équipes de récupération qui doivent encore arriver sur les lieux du splash. S'ensuit après le remorqueur qui va venir du coup récupérer la capsule de la Crew Dragon. Et suite à ça, après on aura la sortie de nos 4 astronautes. Donc autant vous dire que on est encore ensemble pour une bonne heure, sans exagérer. Après, le principal est fait. En tout cas, merci à tous d'avoir été présents à cette heure-ci. Et je pense que Tiffany même est très contente, parce que c'est je pense ton deuxième direct depuis un moment, et puis finalement, tu as fait des beaux trucs. Hein.
Ouais.
Alors moi ce que je vais faire, comme tout à l'heure, je vais vous remettre le son bien comme il faut. Je vais couper ma caméra personnelle, mais par contre je reste dans le chat et je reviens vous voir dès que l'équipe de récupération approche, voilà, de la capsule et qu'on commence le remorquage. Par contre voilà, si vous avez la moindre question, interrogation ou autre, n'hésitez pas à le marquer en commentaire, je garde un œil sur le chat. Voilà, bah écoutez, je vous dis à tout de suite.
Confirm stable 1.
Awesome, thank you.
So just some communication there back and forth with SpaceX core Michael Blasco and Capsule Commander Nicole Mann just to confirm the landing position of the capsule itself. As we can see there on your screen, even better now with that spotlight, the recovery team is approaching the capsule. They are going to make sure that that monomethylhydrazine and nitrogen tetroxide is not present on the exterior of the vehicle. There could potentially be traces due to the fact that those are the thrusters that Dragon was using while in orbit, and so we want to make sure that there aren't any traces of those fumes, basically, so that the team can get close to the capsule. We will actually see an individual climbing on top of the capsule to secure the harnesses that are necessary, the rigging, to lift the capsule onto the recovery vessel. As I have said before, certainly a job that I would not be fit to do, as it involves, as it requires jumping into what we can see as dark water, and climbing on top of the capsule and securing those harnesses.
Where's your sense of adventure? As we heard the Corps and the crew communicate, the capsule is in stable 1. That means it's in an upright position in the water. Makes it easier to recover, obviously. That is the ideal splashdown position for the capsule itself. So the crew members are still inside. They are still in their suits, in their seats. They will remain that way until the spacecraft itself is lifted onto the recovery vessel. But the first ships arrive are those fast boats. Again, they are just checking out the spacecraft, making sure that it's safe for the rest of the team to approach.
So for those of you that have just recently joined, the Crew5 team has splashed down off the coast of Tampa, Florida. That occurred just minutes ago, and the recovery teams are now moving into place.
And we're anticipating that those first approach boats will arrive at the capsule just a few minutes from now.
Dragon, SpaceX is go for recovery personnel to approach. Expect personnel alongside Dragon in 1 minute.
Dragon copy.
SpaceX Corps just giving the crew a heads up. Hey, you might be seeing some people on the outside of the capsule. It's to be expected.
Yeah, first people that they've seen on Earth, you know, in almost 6 months.
That's right, 157 days in space. Now complete as Dragon Endurance with the Crew5 crew, now safely back on Earth.
Again, this was the first flight, so the first re-entry experience as well for 3 of these crew members, Nicole Mann, Josh Cassada, and Anna Kikina. I'm sure that Koichi Wakata, who now has 505 days in space across 5 space flights, told them a lot of what to expect, but it was a new spacecraft for him too. So a lot of new and exciting experiences on today's ride home.
As we said before, the crew generally experiences between 3 to 5 Gs during the re-entry portion of their journey home. So not too bad. Just like a really good roller coaster.
Again, these views coming to us from recovery vessels off the coast of Tampa, Florida, had an on-time splashdown at 9:02 p.m. Eastern Time. And from what we can see, I would say those weather reports were pretty accurate. We had clear skies, able to see the spacecraft coming down under those 4 main parachutes and even the drogue chutes as well. And the seas look pretty calm also.
That's right. So as Leah just said, that splashdown occurred 7 minutes ago. In a few minutes, so there's still more things that has to occur. We can't just pick up the capsule and put them on a boat and bring them out. Very similar to their activities in space. Their activities here for recovery back on Earth are also very highly coordinated and choreographed, really. So we can see that the approach boat has reached the capsule. We should see, hopefully it might be tough because of the distance, but we will hopefully be able to see one of the SpaceX recovery team members will actually hop in the water and then pull themselves up onto the capsule to basically secure the harnesses that are required to lift the capsule onto the recovery vessel. As of right now, if we were able to see
Dragon SpaceX requesting permission to come on board via the display camera view only.
SpaceX Dragon, you are welcome on board.
All right, so just
We copy.
SpaceX Mission Control, basically just making sure it's okay for us to turn those interior cameras on. So we should get a view, the one that we saw before that sits between pilot Josh Cassada and Commander Nicole Mann, so we can see the screens that they're looking at. But as we were saying, the recovery team is circling the vessel, just making sure that there are no hypergol fumes there that are present. There's also another team circling and gathering the parachutes from the water to try and recover those as well. Once we hear the call out that there are no hypergols present, the recovery team will be able to take off their respirators. So if we were able to see them, they would have personal protective equipment on, those breather masks basically to make sure that they're breathing clean air to ensure that, and they will do that until that they are sure that there are no hypergol fumes present.
Of course, during this time, oh, look, here we are. That's our Crew5 astronauts now back on Earth. Again, on the left, you can just see the top of her helmet visor. That's Commander Nicole Mann, NASA astronaut. And on the right, NASA's Josh Cassada, the pilot for the mission.
SpaceX is back on board with the display camera only.
Dragon copy.
So that's the inside of that capsule we were seeing sitting in the water just off the coast of Tampa. Also on board, we have, oh, and a thumbs up there from Nicole Mann and Josh Cassada. I imagine probably the same from Koichi Wakata and Anna Kikina, but to their right and left as the mission specialists. And a good look again at those crew displays. Dragon, again, a totally autonomous flight home. They are just able to monitor the next steps and await for the spacecraft to be picked up by the recovery vessel. So once those ordnance and hypergol checks are complete, it'll take about 18, a little less than 20 minutes for the rigging to be complete. And around the same time, we expect the recovery ship to arrive. And shortly thereafter, they will begin to lift Dragon onto the nest on the recovery ship. They'll pull it toward a platform.
Dragon, SpaceX, hypergol sweeps and unfired ordnance checks are nominal. Rigging is in progress. Approximately 25 minutes until capsule lift. Stand by for PMC with SpaceX flight surgeon.
Dragon, please.
So confirming good ordnance and hypergol checks, meaning they didn't detect any of those fumes that would prevent us from coming closer to the spacecraft, as well as we are anticipating they will have a private medical conference with the SpaceX flight doctors. This is normal routine for astronauts. They have them regularly on the International Space Station. They have them after launch and obviously after splashdown. So just a chance for the crew members to check in with the medical teams.
That's right. So that view there on the right-hand side, there is now an individual who is basically climbing, or will be climbing, on top of the Dragon capsule to secure the harnesses and the rigging that we will use to lift the Dragon capsule out of the water and onto that recovery vessel. That recovery, the larger recovery vessel, is en route. it is getting closer and closer to the Dragon capsule, so we should have some better views as time continues. But as that call out that we just heard about a minute ago, everything checked out from the hypergol standpoint. None were lingering, and so the recovery team, is okay to take off those respirators that they were using for safety purposes and proceed with the nominal rigging procedures.
Once these crew members arrive on the recovery vessel, Shannon, they will again be placed in the nest. The Endurance spacecraft itself will be placed in the nest and moved to a platform where the astronauts will egress, that side hatch being opened for the first time in 157 days since launch last October.
Might have been a false alarm. False Quindar.
So the astronauts will egress, and as with every space flight that we see, whether they are flying, excuse me, from here in America on Dragon, or if they are in a Soyuz spacecraft, all astronauts and cosmonauts receive medical checkouts after they land. Again, this is our totally normal procedure. Just an opportunity for them to get checked out. It is quite an environment change coming back from 157 days in microgravity back to 1G here on Earth.
That's absolutely right. But one thing that is for sure of the recovery, of the splashdown and recovery views that we've had whenever we see the crew coming out of the capsule, I've yet to see somebody come out that didn't have a smile on their face.
Oh, how can you not? They just said it was one great ride. So
yeah.
I'm sure they're all excited, number one, for the experience and the accomplishments that they have, but also now they're back home. They get to spend time with friends and family. They will be helped onto a stretcher, as we've seen before, just to help them get their land legs back.
Yeah, absolutely. It will take about 25 minutes. So we heard, let's see, about 2 minutes ago, we heard that it will take about 25 minutes for the entire rigging process to complete and to lift the capsule onto the recovery vessel. We can see there on the right-hand side of the screen that rigging is in process. The left-hand side of your screen, of course, is a view inside Dragon capsule, where the crew is using those touchscreen displays to monitor progress of everything. I imagine they can also hear what's going on outside as well, in terms of the individual that is crawling around on top of the capsule to secure those harnesses.
It's been 15 minutes now since we had splashdown, 9:02 p.m. Eastern time, again off the coast of Tampa. Everything was looking really nice tonight for that on-time splashdown, right on the minute.
That's right. We even had acquisition of signal about a minute earlier than originally anticipated. But as we said before, it's not an exact time that we know it comes back. So we were certainly happy to hear Commander Nicole Mann's voice come through pretty loud and clear.
And of course, these checks and the rigging and lifting Dragon itself take time, and the teams are very deliberate and take the time that they need to make sure that everything is done properly and safely. But I do think it's very impressive and funny to me that within 2 hours you can go from being in space to already back on land on the recovery ship. It's faster than my flight from California to Houston, so I always think that's very fun.
Speaking of timelines, it's also been pretty incredible to see the continuous improvement of the recovery process itself. So thinking back to the Demo 1, Demo 2 missions, where really that process of lifting the capsule out of the water I forget how long it took the first time we officially did it. I think it was about an hour and a half, and it's really well streamlined at this point in time. You know, this is the fifth operational mission to the International Space Station. Of course, we launched Crew6, but they're still up there. So this is the fifth one to splash down, and then plus Demo 2 with NASA astronauts Bob and Doug, you know, our favorite space dads. And it's just been really cool to see how, as the SpaceX recovery teams have basically iterated the process a number of times, not only with the actual landings, but with practiced ones as well, with a Dragon capsule mock-up. So it's pretty cool to see how streamlined the operations have been. And there we can actually see our first good view of that SpaceX recovery team member that is climbing on board the Dragon capsule. This is exactly what they have to do in order to place the harnesses and the rigging and secure them. That equipment, of course, is critical to the lifting operation where we lift the Dragon capsule out of the water and place it onto the recovery vessel. So we'll be able to see this individual move around almost in a spider monkey-like fashion with just such skill, which is incredible when you think about the fact that you know, they had to get in the water first and swim up to the capsule, and so their wetsuit is wet. The parts of the capsule itself are also wet, so it's not an easy job, and they undergo significant amounts of training in order to perform this job not only correctly but safely as well.
And this was a similar role also existed during Apollo. Those were also obviously splashdown missions. Those were called frogmen. And so they would make sure that the capsule was secured before it was brought into the recovery vessel. But speaking of recovery vessel, as we mentioned, we have several team members that are monitoring and assisting with different roles, whether that is to help with medical checks or to bring the crew Dragon back into the ship itself. We also have my colleague, NASA Public Affairs Officer Chelsea Bayarte, who is on the ship, and she is standing by on the phone to give us an update. So Chelsea, tell us what it's like, what the teams are doing right now, and if you were able to see Crew Dragon as it returned to Earth.
Hey, Leah, how do you hear me?
Loud and clear. You sound great.
Oh my gosh. Well, hello. Ahoy from the SS Shannon recovery ship.
Welcome. I'm so glad that you were able to join us. So tell us what the team members are doing right now to prepare to bring Crew Dragon aboard.
Absolutely. So let me walk us back a couple of just minutes ago as the Crew Dragon came down. We went to the tip top of this boat on the helicopter pad to get a view. The boat lights turned completely off. You could see every star in the sky. That's how dark it was. And all of a sudden, you see the brightest shooting star you ever saw in your life pointing down at Earth. And I was amazed how quickly, after those parachutes deployed, the shooting star went away and it just became another dot in the sky among a sea of stars. But this boat had, and several other boats in the area, turned on their spotlights. They had a drone pointed at it. So you always knew where the Dragon was, even though to me it just looked like another dot. So they were very quick to locate the spacecraft in the sky as it came down. I had my eyes on Dragon just a minute ago. The boat, the SS Shannon, right now is turning to get into a configuration now that we know that we're safe from hypergulls to go closer to the Dragon. Here it is. See it with your own eyes.
Yes, that's amazing. Just in space moments ago, and now we are getting views from the recovery ship as well. We can see it backing up towards the spacecraft. We also had great views coming from the ships during that descent. So can you tell us what's next for the teams and what's next for you and the other visitors on Shannon? Well, we may have lost communication with Chelsea, but what an experience to be able to be there and see it. I'm very fortunate enough to have shared that experience.
I was going to say, I think I recall whenever you were the person on the phone.
Yes, it was absolutely incredible. She's right. It's like a shooting star, and great to hear, you know, that things have been going well on the ship so far. As she mentioned, we were seeing those. It looked like strobe lights almost, but those were the spotlights tracking Crew Dragon as it continued its descent. So yes, they had great coverage of that the entire time.
So we have a great view here of Dragon Endurance there with the Crew5 crew still in their seats, strapped in, kind of like that part of the roller coaster after it ends. You still have to stay in your chair until the attendants give you the okay and lift the bar that keeps you in. So yeah, we can see that recovery team in the water. If you look closely, you can see some of those harnesses hanging there in front of the side hatch. We can see the recovery team members on Shannon there near the nest, that they're also preparing that landing area. So the part of the ship that arches above where those crew members are standing, that will actually actuate outward, and that will be the part that lifts the Dragon capsule out of the water, and it will basically bring it right over where that nest is, and the Dragon capsule will be set down on that nest, and then that nest will then be pulled forward. So kind of like if you think of yourself, like that nest will be pulled in the direction of you as the viewer, toward the forward end of the boat, and that is of course where the side hatch will be opened and the crew will egress there using that side hatch. Now when that side hatch is opened, this will be the first time that the crew inside the Dragon capsule has basically breathed earthly air in 157 days. It's the first time that side hatch will have been opened. Of course, the last time it was open was launch day, and that side hatch was closed in preparation for launch. And then while they are on station, they use the forward hatch, or the hatch that is underneath the nose cone there, which is the pointy end of the Dragon capsule. So I always love seeing that hatch reopened because it's a very nice bookend in terms of when that hatch was last closed, that was the day that they went to space, and today's the day that they came home.
Absolutely, and that journey beginning back in October and ending just 25 minutes ago, an on-time splashdown at 9:02 p.m. Eastern, and everything is really moving along with the timeline. Ideally, you know, the recovery ship arrives about 30 minutes after splashdown, and here we are, almost ready to complete that rigging process. You can see that team member still on the capsule itself. And they will, again, as you mentioned, lift that and place it in the nest. And the platform that the astronauts egress on is built up a little bit because the side hatch is about halfway up the capsule itself. So they will egress to that, be taken out for some routine medical checks, and eventually they will board a helicopter tonight just within a couple of hours of splashing down that will take them back to Florida before they fly back to Houston, and Anna Kikina will also fly back to Russia.
Yeah. So we're getting to the point in time where, there we can see that lifting arm being moved into the recovery position. Everything's going to move pretty quick at this point in time. The capsule will be in that nest much faster than you think it will be. We can see that recovery team member that was in charge of securing all of the harnesses and the rigging still on the capsule. We should see them jumping off and back into the water in momentarily. That will be a good sign to indicate that all those harnesses are secure and in place. Although I imagine it would be kind of fun to ride Dragon as it gets lifted out of the water, but certainly not safe, so we won't be doing that.
And when they lift Dragon, it's also very stable the entire time. It's not swinging around a lot because there are those different attachment points that make it very, very stable for the crew members coming out of the water and being placed on the recovery ship.
Yeah, of course, the motion of the waves creating a lot of that movement, and there we can see that recovery team member jumping off back into the water. So at this point in time, it's a great sign. We should hear a call out soon, or perhaps just see it first, of the capsule being lifted out of the water. Again, this will happen quite quickly.
Dragon, brace for capsule lift.
Dragon.
And as the capsule is being lifted, there's our first view of that heat shield. Once again, that was the primary decelerator for the Dragon capsule. That's really what helped slow the vehicle down to about 350 miles per hour from 17,500, of course, during that re-entry burn that we saw.
Certainly did its job.
Yeah.
Bringing them to that gentle splashdown with the help of those parachutes, about 16 miles per hour. So they have obviously lifted Dragon. They are placing it in that nest. They'll secure it there and remove some of those attachment points before moving it toward the egress platform.
Now we can see some waters held in what looks like kind of like a bucketed area there underneath the side hatch. That is the location of where the main parachutes are stored. So all 4 of those main parachutes are tightly packed and placed in that cubby, basically, and we can see water draining from it now. The location of the drogue parachutes is up near where that harness is secured above the side hatch there at the top.
And it's always interesting for me to see those attachment points because, you know, before seeing these missions or before working at NASA, you would always assume that the parachutes would just come from the top of the spacecraft. So not always the case.
Pareil, américain. Welcome back. Donc bienvenue
Looks
à
like
l'équipe
Dragon is
Crew5 sur
getting comfortably seated in the nest. Again, things moving along pretty quickly. A few minutes ahead of the ideal timeline here. Now just 30 minutes since splashdown. And we already have the spacecraft on the recovery vessel. Again, this recovery vessel being named Shannon after Shannon Walker.
Dragon, welcome aboard the recovery vessel. Recovery personnel are completing final checks. Stand by for translation to the egress platform.
So at this point in time, the Crew5 crew members are feeling a different sensation now. So when they splash down, of course, they're greeted with gravity once again, but there was an additional sensation of being in the water, and now that they are on the recovery vessel, it is clearly more secure than that. Or not more secure, a lot less motion than being in the water. Of course, they're still on a boat, so there's a little bit.
Yeah, and after these connection lines are removed, we'll be looking forward to hatch opening. Of course, we have to move the Dragon to that egress platform first, but Dragon will stay in this hatch, or in this nest, I should say, until it returns to port. So while the astronauts will be flown back to Earth, or they're on Earth, but once they're flown back to solid ground tonight, it does take a little bit of a journey for the spacecraft itself to make it back to port, and it's going to remain in that nest the entire time.
So following along with the recovery procedures, we're looking at roughly 5 to 6 minutes until we get that side hatch open. Once again, assuming that all the checkouts, of course, the capsule, the Dragon capsule itself is equalizing the pressure inside to match the pressure outside as well. And ultimately, the crew is just continuing to monitor the progress. They're using those screens in front of them, but they remain comfortable in their seats. We continue to flow that nitrox air through the suits in order to keep them comfortable. Of course, I always like to say that that air is the same stuff that scuba divers use to, in their breathing equipment. So that cooled air is certainly an additional piece of comfort for the crew during this process, because as we said before, right now there's nothing for them to do but patiently wait for the translation of the Dragon capsule into that more forward position, as Leah was talking about, where we will be able to open the side hatch.
And again, obviously, we've got Dragon Endurance on the left and that view on the right coming from inside the spacecraft itself. Our 4 Crew5 members, as you mentioned, patiently waiting. No action on their part, just continuing to monitor, and as they are now aboard recovery vessel Shannon. Like I said, this is named after Shannon Walker, NASA astronaut who flew on the Crew-1 mission. There's also another SpaceX recovery ship named Megan, after Megan MacArthur, who flew on Crew-2.
So once again, we're standing by for the capsule for that forward translation to the egress platform, which is where we will be able to open Dragon's side hatch and ultimately allow the crew to egress.
And as we've mentioned tonight, the crew will board a helicopter that lands on that helipad where Chelsea was talking about watching splashdown from. They will be transported back to shore tonight. Additionally, along with them, there will be a couple of more helicopters that take off and take some of the additional visiting personnel, including Chelsea, who gave us the report from the boat. And not only people, but they're also taking some time-critical science, some samples from the astronauts themselves. They'll return those extremely quickly to the scientists on Earth.
And there we can see that Dragon Endurance is now making its way to the egress platform with that forward translation of the capsule.
Slow and steady, but this is the last major move for Dragon. After this, we will wait patiently for hatch opening. There you can see that platform I've been discussing. Just behind it is a little hallway. There's some medical checkout rooms for the crew members to get those, as I mentioned, very nominal and very planned medical checkouts now that they're back on Earth.
We were able to see the recovery team hosing the capsule down. We're using fresh water to do that, of course, to help minimize any corrosion to the capsule as we do reuse these. So basically just trying to give it a freshwater bath as it is on the deck. We're also able to see that the recovery team on the platform has their personal respirators or breathers. They are going to do an additional hypergol sweep that is to basically triple check that there are no fumes for the MMH or NTO, that monomethylhydrazine and nitrogen tetroxide. Those are the propellants that are on board the Dragon capsule for its on-orbit propulsion system, and they are not fumes that are you're able to breathe. They're quite toxic to people, so we'll see them perform an additional check.
So once we do open the hatch, the first smiling face that Nicole, Josh, Koichi, and Anna will see will be a SpaceX medical doctor, just to check on them, see if they are ready for egress. We hope to get some views shortly thereafter of our crew members. And here is a great view of the hatch itself. Again, next major milestone will be for hatch open.
Absolutely. So as we mentioned before, while Dragon's top hatch is what is used to connect to the space station, or the forward hatch, the astronauts are going to egress from that hatch right there. That's the side hatch. And before opening the hatch, the spacecraft's cabin pressure is equalized with the outside environment. Then once that side hatch is opened, that will be the crew's first breath of fresh earthly air since boarding Dragon at the start of their mission back in October.
Now, right here, you can see SpaceX crew members. We also have some NASA crew members on the spacecraft itself, or on the recovery ship itself. They are on the spacecraft too. But letting these SpaceX teams take care of preparing Dragon for hatch open. And once that happens, it's important to note again, Nicole, Josh, Koichi, and Anna will be getting that assistance from the recovery teams when they're exiting the capsule. It is the same process for any returning long-duration crew members, because returning to a gravity environment can challenge our vestibular system. That's responsible for maintaining our balance and motion. And of course, safety is always the #1 priority with this operation. So you'll see Nicole, Josh, Koichi, and Anna helped out of the capsule, assisted a few feet to the medical quarters aboard the boat. And if you've ever watched crews return on a Soyuz, or even previously with Dragon, this is the same process as when they are carried from the capsule to waiting chairs. And then in the case of a Soyuz, there's a waiting medical tent. And then, as I mentioned earlier, this is also the time period where that time-critical cargo can be recovered from the spacecraft, with the remainder waiting until the ship is back in port. But some of those cold stowage items, they're able to get that back to the investigators and the researchers as soon as tonight, so they're able to analyze that. And then once the ship and the capsule return, the recovery team will perform some additional inspections before loading Dragon onto a flatbed truck at the SpaceX facility in Cape Canaveral for post-processing and, of course, potential future reflight.
So we're about 5 or 6 minutes away from crew egress. We can see that the personal protective equipment.
Dragon, stand by for a side hatch opening in approximately the next 60 seconds.
We're looking at Rick right now.
So we can see that those, and there it is, side hatch open on Dragon Endurance.
First time since it was closed last October, sending these 4 crew members on their journey to the International Space Station. And in that view on the right, you can see that SpaceX medical doctor getting that first check, making sure everyone is feeling all right back here on planet Earth before we begin helping those crew members out of the capsule.
On the left-hand side of the screen, we can see the recovery team members placing a
Je vous souhaite bon appétit. J'ai pas
of the hatch. As I mentioned before, of course, we reuse our Dragon capsules, and so really to preserve the integrity of that hatch, which of course is important, we put some protective framing around there to help make sure that there is no damage incurred to the side hatch as the crew members are exiting or egressing from the capsule.
Ouais. L'impression.
Still able to get some notes from Chelsea. She said there's a big round of applause on the recovery vessel now that the hatch is open. A really great moment. Really signifies the end of a successful mission.
So as we mentioned before, that the individual that you see there on the right-hand side of your screen between pilot Josh Cassada and Commander Nicole Mann, that is the SpaceX medical doctor, always the first person to pop in. Basically just looking for 4 thumbs up from the crew members to indicate that they're feeling all right and ready to egress the capsule.
We'll also get a chance for one of the photographers. We do have photographers on the recovery ship as well that are able to document the splashdown itself. So, as I mentioned, going to get that shot. Hopefully 4 smiling faces.
I'm sure they're using a wide-angle lens to capture everyone.
Et salut Lumière, comment ça va? Oui, ils sont bien arrivés. Tiens, attends, je vais venir avec vous quelques instants. Voilà. Oui, Crew5 est bien arrivé à l'instant. Je vais juste reprendre du coup la facecam quand on va commencer là dans très peu de temps du coup à faire sortir les 4 astronautes. Alors si je parle doucement, c'est qu'il y a un peu de monde aujourd'hui. Donc voilà, je vais reprendre officiellement la facecam quand ils vont faire sortir les astronautes, mais oui, tout s'est bien passé actuellement.
is the Crew5 astronauts and cosmonaut are now on board the recovery vessel, and we are awaiting their egress from Dragon Endurance. They will come out one at a time, assisted by the recovery team members. As you can imagine, after spending 157 days in space, gravity might not feel super awesome right now, and so we will assist them just to make sure that they are safe, making their first motions back on Earth.
You can see them passing out of the capsule. Those are the tablets that we noticed earlier the crew members wear around their upper thigh. They're able to monitor procedures on those tablets. So they're starting to pass those out of the hatch. I think I've seen all 4 come through, and that was a footrest. Those can be detached, obviously, here on Earth or whether on orbit to have a little bit more space in the capsule. So they'll remove those 4 footrests to allow teams to more easily enter Dragon and help these crew members back on board the ship. Again, this view here in Mission Control in Hawthorne, California, teams at SpaceX monitoring the return and arrival of Crew5. Coming up on about 45 minutes since splashdown tonight. The side hatch is open. Crew members are being prepared for egress. Everything is moving really smoothly tonight so far.
8, 7.
Pretty quick at this point in time.
Ouais.
The capsule will be in that. Once again, that is a view looking toward the side hatch. That view has Commander Nicole Mann on the left-hand side and pilot Josh Cassada on the right-hand side. So they're most likely debriefing the crew members on, you know, what to expect the next steps for their next steps.
And helping them get out of their seat belts, just making things easier for that egress. We saw those foot restraints, or the foot rests were removed from the spacecraft. So just making things easier for our crew members. As you can see, their visors are up. They are hopefully pretty comfortable in those custom fitted suits, as well as those seat inserts that are custom fitted as well. Again, these are SpaceX team members. It helps distinguish due to the different colored flight suits they're wearing. So they're wearing black suits, and typically when you see someone in a royal blue suit, that is a NASA team member. So we saw a couple of those from the other view, but right now this is mainly the SpaceX crew inside Dragon helping the, oh, and there's a few of those NASA team members as we mentioned.
That's a great shot because you can really see that scorching on the thermal protection system, as I was talking about earlier, that evidence of re-entry. The exterior of the capsule got up to 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit, and I think it's quite beautiful to see returned capsules, of course, because you know, it's just that evidence of spaceflight.
And success.
Absolutely.
Just a slight toasting. And just a reminder, of course, once these astronauts are helped out of the capsule, we'll see them being placed likely on stretchers, again, helping them regain their Earth legs. They'll then move into those routine medical checks. Those happen on the boat. And shortly after those, they will board a ready and waiting helicopter to head back to land. Once they come back to Florida, there will be a NASA spacecraft waiting for them to bring them back to Houston. They'll be able to reunite with their friends and family. And it looks like our egress is beginning with NASA astronaut Josh Cassada, pilot of Dragon Endurance on Crew5. His first space flight coming home with 157 days.
I believe there is a almost like a little slide that is secured to the exterior of the capsule and to the egress deck, basically to bridge that gap. Yeah, we could see Josh sliding out of the frame there, and that really just helps them get out of the capsule, not only from the standpoint of making it easier on them, but also preserving the hardware around that, the hardware of the side hatch as well. Of course, all those buttons that we see there on the crew displays are all now completely deactivated now that the Dragon capsule is recovered in the recovery vessel. And if bump one with their elbow or their head, nothing would happen. Those have all been saved.
So Josh Cassada, NASA astronaut, our first crew member out of the spacecraft. Looks like those SpaceX team members are back inside Dragon Endurance, and they are helping. I doubt we'll hear any more of those calls from the crew to the ground now that the hatch is open, but every time I hear it, I pause a little bit.
Yep. If I had to guess, that was probably that recovery team member accidentally bumping the armrest comm panel, which is the comm panel that they use to basically push to talk while they're in their seats. So if I had to guess, that was an accidental bump there. So it looks like the second individual to egress from the Dragon capsule will be Commander Nicole Mann. And there she goes.
Also 157 days for Nicole, being that it was her first space flight.
I would imagine for Koichi, who you mentioned earlier, has, you'll have to refresh my memory, over 500 days now logged in space?
Yes, exactly 505
There
today.
we go.
So
I imagine this part is never easy, but he's very familiar, knows what to expect in terms of the change in mobility now that he's back on Earth.
Commander of Crew5, Nicole Mann, also became the first Native American woman to live on the International Space Station. So a real moment of pride there, I'm sure. And you can see her being helped to those medical quarters. Again, all nominal, all pre-planned checks. Just an opportunity to make sure the crew is feeling good before they take that helicopter ride back to shore.
Exactly, and as you mentioned earlier, all the crew members are effectively placed on what basically looks like a stretcher, and that's just, again, really to assist them because returning to Earth after, as we said before, 157 days in space can be pretty tough on the body, and of course, in order to keep them safe, we want to assist them. So all four of the crew members are placed on a wheelie bed and rolled back to those medical quarters, as you said, for their evaluations with the the flight doctors.
So now our NASA astronauts are out of the spacecraft. We are awaiting egress of Roscosmos cosmonaut Anna Kikina, her first space flight, and as we mentioned, seasoned veteran Koichi Wakata of the Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency. And this looks like it may be Anna.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, that slide, we have a great view of that slide now. Really helps the crew in this egress procedure.
Oh, this is probably Koichi, judging by, I can see that Japanese flag on that team member right there on the right.
Yeah, I think you're right, because it looked like, yeah, that looks like Koichi. It looks like they were pulling from seat 1, so yeah, that would have been Koichi's.
Oh, I can see a
Look
smile
at that
on his
smile.
face. Definitely not his first rodeo. That means our last mission specialist and crew member to egress today will be Anna Kikina. In that far right seat, we can still see one of those SpaceX crew members inside helping her out of the seat restraints. Not even an hour since splashdown, and we are almost having all 4 crew members out of the spacecraft.
That's right. Splashdown occurred off the coast of Tampa, Florida at 9:02 p.m. Eastern Time. So yeah, we're just shy of an hour.
Again, we had great weather reports as we prepared to splash down at Tampa, and we even got pretty good views of how calm the ocean appeared to be as the crew members awaited the recovery ship to arrive.
And for those that might be wondering, at the top of the capsule there, there was a curved line. That was the line indicating where the nose cone was separated from the primary structure. So it looks like Anna Kikina, our cosmonaut on board Crew5, is about to make her way down the fun slide and egress Dragon Endurance, which once again made its second splashdown.
Roscosmos cosmonaut Anna Kikina, our final crew member to egress tonight. Again, her first space flight. She will also have those same medical checks before flying back to Russia.
Look at that smile as well.
And that is all 4 of our crew members. Now that Nicole, Josh, Koichi, and Anna are safely back home on Earth and getting checked out by the medical teams, we're going to wrap up our live coverage of their return. Again, this all kicked off on October 5th, 2022, October 5 for Crew5, from historic launch pad 39A at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. After successful liftoff and separation from Falcon 9, Nicole, Josh, Koichi, and Anna made a 28-hour flight on board Dragon 2, the International Space Station. Since arriving at the space station, they spent nearly 6 months as members of Expedition 67 and 68, executing science experiments, spacewalks, and repairs while aboard the orbiting laboratory.
Their journey home began about 19 hours ago on March 10th when they closed the forward hatch to the Dragon capsule and undocked from the International Space Station at 11:20 p.m. Pacific time. After 4 successful departure burns and a phasing burn to line up their orbit, Nicole, Josh, Koichi, and Anna rested for a few hours before waking up to prepare for their re-entry. We jettisoned Dragon's trunk and performed our final on-orbit maneuver, the deorbit burn, at 5:11 p.m. Pacific time to send the Dragon on its path home. The spacecraft re-entered Earth's atmosphere and slowed its descent with successful deployments of 2 drogue parachutes and 4 healthy mains, with the final splashdown occurring off the coast of Florida at 6:02 p.m. Pacific time. Following that successful splashdown, we saw SpaceX recovery experts move in and prepare Dragon Endurance for its lift onto the recovery vessel. And just a little less than an hour ago, 58 minutes to be exact.
Wow.
Following splashdown, we saw Nicole, Josh, Koichi, and Anna make their way out of the Dragon capsule and into the recovery ship's medical facilities, safe and sound.
So next up, they will catch that helicopter flight back to shore. They will transfer 2 aircraft that will take them home. Nicole, Josh, Koichi, and Anna will take a NASA plane for the short flight to Houston, and later Anna will fly back to Russia. They will be reunited with families to bring an end to this mission. Of course, as always, it's been an honor and a privilege to share their journey with all of you as we continue this new era in human spaceflight.
The return today marks the end of a direct handover that we just executed after successfully launching the Crew5 mission to the space station just a little over a week, actually, about a week ago. It has been an incredible honor and joy to share this mission with the public. All the teams from SpaceX and NASA continue to work hard to keep America leading the world in human spaceflight. Continue to follow SpaceX and NASA online and on social media for updates for the very latest on crew and cargo flights to and from the International Space Station.
And we will continue to share the progress of Nicole, Josh, Koichi, and Anna on social media as they travel back home. We also have a post-splashdown media telecon coming up at approximately 7:30 p.m. Pacific time, 10:30 p.m. Eastern time, where leadership from NASA, JAXA, and SpaceX will share updates as we conclude this successful mission. So we say thanks one more time for tuning in and cheering on Nicole, Josh, Koichi, and Anna as they made their return back to Earth. So from all of us at NASA and SpaceX, welcome home, Crew5, and we'll see you next time.
Nous sommes go pour la mise à feu. H-.